Hello, we're the digital experience team in inbound marketing. This is Retro 13 for the 2-week sprint ending today, May 6th. We're going to kick it off with by talking about things that went well. I have the first point on the list here. I enjoyed tag teaming the install page with Laura. We were super quick and efficient with some of the choices we've made and just getting that off the ground. It was so seamless despite some of the noise around us. Laura has a little point there. Feeling is mutual.
+1, yeah.
+1. I'll vocalize for Tyler. I'll read off what he wrote. I feel like this time around, I really got a handle on appropriately scoping and planning work. I only had to push one issue to the next sprint, and one of my MRs ran long. With the help of Barker and Tina, we were able to ship and iterate. And I +1 that as well. Jess.
I had a pretty great sprint because it was kind of low key. I had a lot of things out there, but it was just kind of like keeping tabs on like copy and coming in as needed. And so I got a chance to actually catch up on everything, like catch up on the research that I did a month or two ago that I never got to actually do the readout for, and make some slippers changes that I've noticed for like months, but I haven't had a chance to like talk with Steven and get them done. So it was just really nice to have that time to catch up and feel like I'm not constantly just like in a fire drill. Highly recommend it. Yeah.
I want to call out the workflow when you have CSS work when working from slippers to www is like super easy. Like when I'm working on a page and I update the package.json and I literally like copy paste the code snippet, like it just all works. So like good for us to get to that point. Like we were not there like 3 months ago. So like super great work this quarter in terms of getting to that point.
Yeah, and then I'll just finish up with saying it was great collaboration with all of our team for Q2, getting together, shooting ideas back and forth, and then sort of level setting and getting a good pulse check on where we're going.
All right, anyone else? Okay, we can move on to things to improve on. I have the first note. So cross-team collaboration. So our internal team collaboration is pretty good. And during our Q2 kickoff, we talked about ways that we can improve collaborating with each other, but we haven't actually talked much about how to collaborate with everyone else in the GitLab ecosystem. I have no thoughts at the moment, but I'm definitely flagging that as something we need to work on moving forward, starting today. Laura, you have a point there.
Because this has started coming up. We have people who are not on our team looking to make changes, and some of the changes are very helpful. We want to encourage collaboration. Some of the changes were put there like they shouldn't be changed kind of thing. So just making sure that we're kind of in the loop. I mentioned on one of these MRs that came in kind of externally, 3 things that people should be doing if they're making changes to the marketing site is, number 1, link the issue, just so we have some context. Sometimes it's just an MR that we get tagged in and we don't really know the context. So link the issue, tag a digital experience engineer, like one of the engineers to do engineering code review, and tag one of the designers to do a design review. So those 3 things. I don't know if we want to add to a handbook. I don't know if that's like a hard and fast rule. I think that some pages are like really high visibility, and if they're like OKR pages and stuff too, that we should probably kind of let people know, like just loop us in, like to give it a little check, just let us know. And, it ties in with the racy stuff that we've kind of been talking about also. But I think Javi has the next point.
Yeah, I just want to follow up briefly just because I also have the next point, but I want to say that like, I think if we have OKR stuff related to it, I think like we have ownership over that. And I don't know if that necessarily means we're like the DRI for stuff like that, but I think that like if we have OKRs attached to it, like we should have some say. I don't know. That gets into really tricky, murky water when there's other people that also probably have OKRs attached to it, but like maybe that's something that we can like iterate on further. I have very strong opinions on this. I would just say that like for stuff that's like outside of our own OKRs, I think that like having Brandon in this role of like technical product owner will help. I think that like essentially the big takeaway for me on this stuff is just that like we should not take people's requests that come our way as gospel. I think like as a collaborator, as a collaborating party, like we should have ownership to say like this part of this request doesn't work for this reason. Like we need to scope down this and that. And you know, I wrote like reject requests, but like I don't even see it as rejecting a request. It's more so like how do we make this request fit within our schedule? And like at what timeline do we need things to get worked on? I have like a little point on like I think that it makes sense to have like an established process for requests like that. So like having something like kickoffs is really popular. Having something like, you know, other stuff that like happens within that. I could keep going on, but just I think we need to be a party that's like consulted throughout the entire process. I think we need to be included in like the problem definition point of like why something needs to be built out. I think it's really common for people to be like, build a page here. Whereas like, is a page the right solution to the problem that you're trying to solve? Like, what is your desired outcome? Like, and I think if we're working on agency related stuff, like we need to be included in that conversation. And that's like a strong opinion that I have.
I just added in a question, which is, I'm wondering if some of the issue around people coming in and doing an iteration is that it's so quickly following another iteration that just happened. And we're not getting a chance to evaluate the initial iteration on how it like improved or didn't improve whatever we were trying to change. I'm wondering, like, and this is just totally hypothetical, so I'm just putting it out there. I'm wondering if we need like a code freeze for like 2 weeks after a big change, just to say like, hey, we were trying to evaluate this thing. And if you're coming in with another change, we can't evaluate the first thing unless it maybe like a small spelling error or something might be okay. But like if you're trying to like to make a big change on the page that just got a big change, it's like too soon. I don't know, any thoughts on that?
It sounds really interesting because it gives it time to bed in and set or settle, like, and we get more data that way. Like whatever we can measure, we can manage better. So if we're changing things too early, we don't know if we're actually making correct changes or taking the right approach. I like that as a concept. I think it's very strong.
I'm into it. Whether it's 2 weeks or some amount of time, but like in our example, we did have a page that was like agreed upon by content and design and engineering and everyone, and we all worked together. We built the page, Todd signs off on it, looks great, and then we ship it. And then the next day, we're getting MRs for changes that we don't have any context around. You know, we had a whole team that kind of agreed on this, and this hasn't settled. So maybe a freeze on that, but I don't know if we need a hard and fast 2-week rule. If we're able to do that, I don't know. I like it, but
I
think I put 2 weeks out there, sorry, just because like that's when you normally do like an A/B test to evaluate. It depends on the traffic you get on the page, but like the average is like a 2 week. So that's just random 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like we have to make sure that if we implement something like that, that we're actually measuring stuff and not just like leave us alone for 2 weeks.
The only case where I would like advise against the 2 weeks is when there's regressions. So we deploy something big and it's like, oh, that was broken. Like when the blog template went out and it was like, oh, the click to tweet component isn't there. Probably need to add that, you know? So.
it's true. I guess there's like a distinguish between like bugs and improvements. If you're thinking you're making an improvement, like, did we just improve this page?
Yeah,
or,
like copy and design iterations, I would say like 2 weeks, definitely, you know. A code regression, might want to do that sooner.
True.
Next is Tyler, unless anyone else has any more points on this point. I'll read off for Tyler. Based on the Q2 kickoff conversations, it feels like maybe we're not communicating completely to Michael or others about what certain types of work are and what their impact is. I'm not sure what the action item is here, but it sounds like we are missing context inside and outside the team. And Jess has the first point related to this comment.
Yeah, we're kind of just talking about this, but we didn't do something that I'm used to doing in quarterly planning, which is like actually estimating the size of the work before we agree to it. And I feel like we kind of forgot to do that maybe this time around, especially with that. I think we've all talked about the 15-page one, which seems like very big, and we all had a different definition of done. So it's very difficult to like accurately say like, yes, we can get this done, or no, we can't, because we weren't really sure. You know, like we said, like one page isn't necessarily equal to another page. Like one could be very small, one could be very large. And so just saying like 15 doesn't really mean 15. It's like, this is a 1, this is a 5. And like, yeah, so it's hard to evaluate. And I feel like we just missed the step there.
Yeah, I just kind of added in that when we did the exercise where we held up our hands and put like a confidence level based on our fingers, that opened up a big dialogue about like why we were so not confident. A lot of us weren't confident in what we could deliver in that time. And I think that was really helpful. And we started a conversation around it. So having some sort of mechanism, whether it is like loose t-shirt design or t-shirt sizes, small, medium, large, or whatever it is, but something that's like we have a say in what we think the work will be and what counts as done. Javi? Or no, Jess, that's me. Yeah, so I also just want to add on to that because something we did at Lululemon, and I thought they did a very good job at quarterly planning there, was yeah, different Jay, was that they did both t-shirt sizing and the fist of 5, which is the, you know, I think 5 or 4 3 2. And it was like an iterative process. So like first you estimate with the t-shirt size, and then like we all say, okay, 1 2 3, what's your fist of 5? And like if everyone comes back at a 3, you're like, okay, we need to go back again and maybe take something off the list or iterate it and say we're only going to do like this version of that and make it a smaller estimation. And then you do the fist of 5 again, and once everyone's like at least at a 4, because it's very rare to get a 5, then you're like, okay, cool, we're solid on this. So both of those things are valuable.
I had some points. Strong agreement. I actually just added this to my 101 verbatim with Michael. But with like the comparison pages, which is in our OKR, which is actually like 80 pages, not just one. Navigation implementation, the events template, which is on deck for like now. I think it might force us to implement things the cheap and dirty way. And is that okay? Is that not? That's just kind of where I'm like, okay, we could do it that way. So it feels like we're building a house. We have some of the foundation, but it's not complete. And we're pushing the hard stuff off, and it just keeps getting pushed off and out. And then not to mention Netlify CMS just totally breaks like on GitLab 14.4 unless we fix the authentication. And 14.4 is in like 3 months. It might break next month. And like, that was just nowhere in Q2. So I'm like, okay, we'll just throw out all that work. Cool. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Can I just add to that too? Because that brought up another good point of things we maybe forgot to do was add a list of dependencies for this quarter. Like what are other teams doing? Are there anything outside of our organization, like Netlify is making a big change that might affect us? We didn't really talk through that either.
And we're down a Sunmi and going to be training a new Nathan. So.
Yeah. I just wrote a little note at the end of that point, just like, I think this should be like another page that we collaborate on the handbook on specifically. Cause it's like, if this keeps coming up, like we should have like some artifact that like communicates this point that I think like should be more publicly visible. And I think like the handbook page would be like a good place to start with that.
Stephen?
Me, yeah. I guess we kind of talked about it before, but like understanding what Slippers is and what it does, it's not this broad stroke solution to absolutely every problem that we have and don't have right now. It's a tool that we can use to enhance our workflow, but it's never really done because we're always going to add and edit and enhance this thing as we use it, as we do with any experience, basically. And it needs continuous love, care, and maintenance. And as we do this, it advances us through the product versioning. So like we're at 0.11 right now. At the end of the next sprint, we could be at 0.12 because we've made an edit, and we can add these things as we go. So the more we continuously work on it, the more it brings it forward and adds new features and supports different teams. And then some sub points to that, which is I've already had questions, and I think Michael has had some questions as well around like, when can other teams use this? And I'm a bit scared about opening it up to them just yet with our lack of accessibility and lack of documentation around how to use it. So we're obviously very familiar with it because we built it. So we have the highest level of that knowledge. And as a result of that, then that puts us into a kind of a quasi support role, because we're now the design system team, even though we are the output team. So once that happens, we're going to get bombarded with questions. How do we take them in? How do we action them? How do we measure them? Are they important? Are they not? Are they questions on how to use it? Are they questions on how they can enhance something? What happens when we give it to a team and they don't see what they want? You know, myself and Jess are familiar with these questions that come in thick and fast. You end up being like Neo in the Matrix, dodging all the bullets. So we have to help teams implement and use the system. And then simple things like we need to enhance it over time, which is like adding animations and interactions. So it's not just a bunch of static things on the page. So as the brand begins to flesh out more what the brand vision is, that's when our design system can really kick into gear and really add more interaction, which then makes experiences a bit more palatable to users at different stages. And it just makes our .com just that much nicer, that bit more nicer overall. So yeah, it's just a fear of that people think that this is done. It's not. It's never really done. It's just at a stage, and now it needs to be maintained.
I mean, technically, it's like we haven't actually released version 1, right? Typically, like version 1.0 is, okay, this is ready for public consumption, right? And so the fact that we're still on 0. whatever is our way of saying like, this is still a beta thing, you know? And so, yeah, I do think like it needs a bit more time before it's there. But yeah, design systems are ongoing for years, you know. So.
Give a bit of context on that as well. At TELUS, it took 2 years and 50 releases to get to 1.0. So I mean, we're already further ahead of that, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Like the tooling is different. We have Storybook and we have Tailwind, and there's more refined processes, and people have more experience on how to do these things. But that's an idea, and that was a dedicated team with an agency. So like it was far bigger than anything that we've had. It's probably about 4 times the size with a budget of about 25 million. So it gives you an idea of just like the sheer scale of it. But of course, a telco that is publicly traded will have more dependencies on it. So
I mean, like, I just wanted to speak very briefly on like emotion and whatnot. Like, it's hard to prioritize. Like, this is going to sound bad, but it's like the truth. It's like, it's hard for us to prioritize things like accessibility and motion when like we can't even get this system on pages, if that makes sense. Like, if that's a struggle, like it's hard to get everything else in, you know, like there's work that still needs to be done in terms of like figuring out how to integrate this nicely with about GitLab, when the technical debt for that has been, you know, I mean, I can go back 8 years and see the first commit, you know, and there was no one doing stuff like us before that. So it's like, it's going to take a while to chip that all away. And I think that's like what is slowing us down a lot, is that like we have things outside of our control that are just like making every change we want to make a massive lift.
That resonates with me. You know, I had to take a lot of medicine on Tuesday and was like, we're not actually going to separate the handbook, which is cool. I understand why. Like, is that really going to what pushes GitLab stock price through the roof? I don't know, maybe not. Like, and that's what we got to be focusing on. So maybe reducing like the emotional response I have to the work that I'm doing is something I'm personally going to be working on.
Are there any other action items we can associate with your comments, Stephen? Well, let's get into, oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
we can get into it, but nothing. Give me a minute. I need to.
No problem.
Cheers.
Well, let's review the other action items then if we're done here. So just to kind of wrap up this retro, we don't have a whole lot here, but Hobby, you have the first one.
Yeah, and I think this just goes with like, being handbook first, writing MRs for the digital experience handbook page on cross team collaboration and quarterly planning. Stuff like definition of done comes to mind. I think those are like quick, easy wins, get people to get the ball rolling on that. It also makes it easier for, like, say, if we're onboarding someone new, for them to have an artifact of like these discussions that have happened beforehand. So yeah, Tina?
Yeah, I wrote two here, but they're from Jess. Explore code freezes. Just kind of take a look at that idea, see if that could work for us. As Lauren pointed out, we really want to do code freezes mostly on design and copy, not on code regression. And the other one is we need to talk about adding a list of dependencies to our Q2 OKRs. I think that's a great idea.
I have a quick question around the first one you mentioned about the code freeze. For that install page that was had a quick request iteration after that, did you guys have like a feedback issue for the install page when it launched?
The issue was the issue, but the feedback change didn't come in a natural way. It came in as changed code in an MR from a slightly outside party.
Yeah, it was
kind of hard
to
define that situation. Yeah, it's not at all like all of the other situations we've been through.
For sure. I'm just wondering if we could say, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say it was something that originally Todd had opened up an issue saying, let's fix this header page. And that led to 2 or 3 different kind of iterations. And then we all agreed, and then it got kind of rechanged again.
Not by Todd, by like someone else that changed the code and created an MR for Laura to approve.
I know Becky often, like when we're launching something, we'll create a separate issue, like literally just for feedback. Be like, okay, we're launching this thing, and if you have feedback, put it here. And I'm wondering if something like that also could have helped this situation, unless maybe you did have that and I just misunderstood. But like you could be like, oh, hey, great idea. Let's put it in this feedback issue, and we can like get it into our process or something.
It is,
yeah, that's a good idea, but it was definitely different than that.
Yeah, because we have mentioned a few times, like this page is also one of those 15 OKR pages that we're kind of looking at. So we have mentioned like, oh, this is going to get updates, like go over here and post your thoughts in our OKR, you know? So there wasn't necessarily a feedback issue, but there is like a OKR issue that, you know, we did let everyone know that this will be like iterated on. But yeah, like in general, if there is no other planned work on the page, yeah, we can just open up feedback issues, link it to the original issue, close the first one, and then close the second one some number of time later.
Yep.
Stephen?
Sorry. Yeah, like with the way we've been talking about, you know, defining the system as, you know, how we can open it up in 1.0, like it's probably a good idea to begin to understand like what is the definition of what 1.0 is, and then different, and if we know where we are and we know where we need to be, what are the markers in the sand that we can hit to get to 0.4, 0.5, and then all the little subsequent ones that happen after that. I think that would probably help us, yeah, as Jess says, a definition of done. That would help us like communicate more to people about when they can start to begin to see their usage of the system and how we can contribute. And there's more to 1.0 than just more blocks, more components, and more elements. There needs to be documentation, there needs to be accessibility standards, and there needs to be code standards. So there's still like a lot of work to do. However, we can still use the system as it is for our use. Like it's not like it's so far away from being used properly that it's basically useless or a concept. It's still something that we can use ourselves, but then outside of that, it's a bit sketchy about really giving it to other teams because we need to have support models set up. So it would be good to do maybe something like how do we get to 1.0 based on where we are, so we know what the journey is. And it would be great to somehow define different steps that we can have throughout the next sprints, and what people are doing, if they can contribute small bits and sort of like divide and conquer in a way.
I got the next one. I'm going to start with like, I love GitLab. I love working here. I think it's like the best thing ever. But something I'm personally going to work on, possibly a team, is to reduce emotional investment in projects. There's certain projects that I start doing and I'm like, wow, like, you know, I'm going to bed thinking about it, waking up thinking about it. And I just think it's the best thing in the world. And that's great. But sometimes I think it silos me into just really being all about that project. And this is, I mean, this is a job, you know, this isn't like real life. It is real life, but not, you know what I mean? Like, so yeah. So reducing the emotional investment in that, and then also reducing the response that I have, the emotional response, if their decision comes that I don't agree with, and not being just really sad about it. Just being like, okay, there's a decision made. That's a decision. Now you got to go forward with that. And that's something that I'm going to work on.
Yeah, I +1 that resonates with me. And I just, you know, something I use a lot is like, what I think a lot is like, I'm a duck. Like when water falls on me, it just rolls off my feathers. And so if I get like, I'm a duck, I'm a duck, I'm a duck, I'm a duck.
I added in the disagree and commit in there link. I think it's something Amazon originally came up with, but it is helpful to just like say your piece, fight for what you want, but then when the time comes and it's like not up to you, you're like, okay, I totally disagree, but I'm committing and I'm going forward with it. And it doesn't necessarily help with the emotional aspect of it, but maybe a little bit. I mean, sometimes it is hard to get separated from something you really believe strongly in, but it is a path forward.
Thanks. I love that you always have a link for everything, Jess.
I try.
I guess that wraps it up. Wraps up our retro, last retro of the quarter, I guess. See you in 2 weeks.